From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I think overall Iraqis want the U.S. to leave. Everyone who I meet wants the U.S. to leave, but not because Iraq has been turned into a democracy and everyone is happy. People want the U.S. to leave because the U.S. is directly and indirectly responsible of the destruction that happened to Iraq.
It was 1 year ago today the Obama administration announced it's pulling the last full U.S. combat brigade from Iraq. Today, roughly 46,000 U.S. troops remain, along with more than 64,000 contractors. Now, as Iraq has suffered its deadliest week of the year, there's increasing speculation the U.S. will extend the occupation past the withdrawal deadline of December 31st. We'll speak with Iraqi blogger and political analyst Raed Jarrar. Then thousands of activists are heading to Washington, D.C. for a two-week protest at the White House against the Keystone XL pipeline that would carry tar sands from Alberta, Canada, to the Gulf of Mexico. We'll host a debate between Jane Klebb of Bold, Nebraska, and Cindy Schild of the American Petroleum Institute. The strike by 45,000 Verizon workers will wrap up our show as it approached the two-week mark.
Verizon has basically launched a full-scale attack on our jobs, our living standards, our wages, our benefits.
We talked to Stephen Greenhouse, labor reporter for The New York Times, about the Verizon strike and the state of jobs in America today. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Afghan militants killed at least 9 people in a British cultural office in the Afghan capital of Kabul. In a coordinated attack, a suicide bomb destroyed the compound wall to the British Council, and then a group of armed men attacked the compound. 8 Afghan police officers and a foreign security official died in the attack, as did 4 of the gunmen. The Taliban said the attack marked the anniversary of Afghanistan's independence from Britain in 1919. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, at least 40 people have been killed and 85 others wounded in a mosque bombing in Gundi, a village in the Khyber tribal region. The attack was the first major violent incident in the nation since the holy month of Ramadan began. For the first time since the crackdown on protests began in Syria 5 months ago, the United States and European Union have called on the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to step down. In a statement released Thursday, President Obama accused Assad of torturing and slaughtering his own people. Obama ordered Syrian government assets in the United States frozen, banned U.S. citizens from operating in or investing in Syria, and prohibited U.S. imports of Syrian oil products. This is Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
We understand the strong desire of the Syrian people that no foreign country should intervene in their struggle, and we respect their wishes. At the same time, we will do our part to support their aspirations for a Syria that is democratic, just, and inclusive. And we will stand up for their universal rights and dignity by pressuring the regime and Assad personally to get out of the way of this transition.
At the United Nations, Syrian Ambassador Bashar Jafri criticized the new sanctions.
The United States, through imposing sanctions and calling for President Assad to step down, is launching and waging a humanitarian and diplomatic war against us. This war has one aim: instigating further violence in the country and giving the wrong message to the terrorist armed groups that they are under American and Western protection, so that they go ahead with their insurrection and disruptive and destructive activities in the country.
Global stock prices are continuing to fall as fears mount over the U.S. economy and the health of the European banking system. On Thursday, stock indexes in Britain, France, Germany suffered their biggest daily slide in over 2 years. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Index fell over 400 points. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal is reporting U.S. federal and state regulators are intensifying their scrutiny of the U.S. arms of Europe's biggest banks, worrying about spillover from Europe's debt crisis into the U.S. banking system. In other banking news, Bank of America is reportedly considering eliminating at least 10,000 jobs, roughly 3.5% of its workforce. In the first round of layoffs, the bank is expected to cut 3,500 jobs by the end of September. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Georgia, several people lost consciousness while waiting in a massive line at a job fair Thursday, sponsored by the Congressional Black Caucus. Officials estimate as many as 4,000 people lined up in the heat seeking a job. 9 people were treated by emergency crews for heat-related illness. 7 of them were sent to the hospital. The Obama administration's announced plans to conduct case-by-case reviews of all immigrants facing deportation. The move is expected to ease the way for undocumented immigrants who came to the United States as children and have already spent years in the country to stay and work legally. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano revealed the new policy in a letter to Senators Dick Durbin and Richard Lugar. In April, the senators sent a letter to Napolitano asking her to stop deportations of immigrant students who could earn legal status under the proposed DREAM Act. The new policy was announced just days after a group of Latino groups held a nationwide day of protest against the administration's deportation policy. The Obama administration's overseen a record number of deportations in each of the past 3 years. Under the new policy, administration officials have acknowledged the actual number of immigrants deported is not expected to decrease. The National Immigration Law Center praised the new policy but expressed concern over what will happen to immigrants already being detained for low-level offenses and minor traffic violations as a result of the Secure Communities program. Meanwhile, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer, a Republican, slammed the new policy as a form of, quote, backdoor amnesty. On the presidential campaign trail, Texas Governor Rick Perry defended the teaching of creationism during a campaign stop in New Hampshire. Perry made the comment when he was asked by a 4th grader how old the Earth is. While scientists say the Earth is at least 4 billion years old, most creationists believe it is no more than 10,000 years old. Governor Perry went on to say he did not know the age of the Earth and then began questioning the theory of evolution, saying it has some gaps. Perry said both creationism and evolution are taught in Texas schools. Listen carefully.
In Texas, we teach both creationism and evolution in our public schools.
Ask him why he doesn't believe in science.
Because I figure you're smart enough to figure out which one is right.
Republican rival John Huntsman took to Twitter to attack Governor Perry's stance. Huntsman tweeted, quote, "To be clear, I believe in evolution and trust scientists on global warming. Call me crazy." Meanwhile, Republican presidential candidate Michele Bachmann defended her past employment as a tax lawyer at the Internal Revenue Service during a campaign speech in South Carolina. Bachmann claims she worked at the IRS in an effort to infiltrate the agency. She told the crowd, quote, "The first rule of war is know your enemy." Her comments were recorded by an audience member who posted them online. The audio is hard to make out.
How many of you work in the IRS? No, it's time to change it. I went to work in that system because the first rule of war is know your enemy. So I went to the inside to learn how they work because I wanted to beat them.
Michele Bachmann speaking in South Carolina. She concluded her comments by saying she went inside the IRS to learn how they work because she wanted to beat them. Israeli aircraft bombed Hamas outposts in Gaza earlier today, while Palestinians fired rockets into southern Israel as violence escalated following a series of deadly attacks. On Thursday, 8 Israelis died and 25 were injured in southern Israel in an attack along the border with Egypt. Israel blamed the Gaza-based Popular Resistance Committees for the attack. Israeli jets later carried out airstrikes in Gaza, killing at least 6 people, including a 9-year-old boy. In India, a self-styled Gandhian campaigner who's become a symbol of popular outrage over corruption in India left jail earlier today to carry on a hunger fast after a beleaguered government caved into huge protests across India. And Hazare's exit was broadcast live across India as thousands of supporters thronged outside the jail. After 3 days in jail, the government has allowed him to stage a 15-day hunger strike. Hazare, who had been arrested earlier in the week and then ordered released, had refused to leave jail until he was allowed to fast publicly. A A new study by the Japanese government has found nearly half the children surveyed in 3 towns near the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant have traces of radioactive elements in their thyroid glands. The Japanese government maintains that none of the children showed radiation levels that would be problematic, but the study's findings have fueled concern over the long-term fallout from the nuclear disaster. Radioactive iodine tends to gather in the thyroid glands of minors in particular, increasing the risk of developing cancer later in life. In other news from Japan, Prime Minister Naoto Kan has scrapped plans to meet with President Obama in Washington next month. Speculation is growing in Japan that Kan may resign in the coming weeks. Egypt's ruling military council has dropped charges against one of the most well-known activists in the revolution, following criticism from human rights groups of subjecting civilians to military trials. Asma Mahfouz was arrested last week for inciting violence against Egypt's armed forces for comments she made on the social networking site Facebook. The military council also dropped charges against Louai Nagati, who was arrested for disturbing public order during protests in late July. According to Human Rights Watch, at least 10,000 civilians have been sentenced by military courts in Egypt since January. For an interesting article on this story, you can go to Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel-Qadoos' piece. We link to it at democracynow.org. Elizabeth Warren has filed paperwork in Massachusetts to create an exploratory campaign committee, the next step in a possible challenge to Republican Senator Scott Brown. Warren is the Harvard Law School professor and Obama administration official who played an instrumental role in forming the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Warren has been traveling around Massachusetts this week, conducting a self-described listening tour. Another pipeline has ruptured near the flooded Missouri River Basin. As much as 3,300 barrels of natural gas leaked on Saturday near Onawa, Iowa. The spill comes just a month after an ExxonMobil pipeline leaked 1,000 barrels of crude into the flooded Yellowstone River in Montana, which feeds the Missouri River. Hundreds of foreign students taking part in a State Department cultural exchange summer program walked out of their job at a Hersheys chocolate plant in Pennsylvania. The students said their jobs are exploitative and in many cases grossly fail to cover the costs they spent on visas in their home countries. The students have reportedly been required to lift heavy boxes, work 8-hour shifts beginning at 11 at night, and stand for long periods of time while packing Reese's candies, Kit Kats, and Almond Joys on a fast-moving production line. A new study finds black scientists are less likely to receive research funding from the National Institutes of Health than their white counterparts. According to the report, a 10 percentage point gap exists between black and white researchers when it comes to winning the most common type of NIH grant, despite the fact that all hold doctorate degrees and have similar levels of experience. Roughly 27% of white applicants won funding between the year 2000 and 2006, compared to just 17% of African Americans. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.